The 2024 Japanese Grand Prix concluded successfully at the iconic Suzuka circuit last week. Since the first free practice session, Red Bull drivers started to dominate the race weekend by setting some fast laps. Except the rain-affected FP2, all the other sessions were dominated by Verstappen and Perez by recording Red Bull 1-2s. This was a great comeback from the Milton Keynes-based squad after a disastrous campaign at Albert Park. Welcome back to Total F1. We're going to discuss the highlights of the Japanese Grand Prix in detail. But before we proceed, hit the subscribe button and smash the bell icon for more exciting updates. Since the FP1, Red Bull drivers started to unleash the full power of their cars, as they appeared to be frustrated with what they experienced at Albert Park, Australia. Verstappen topped the timesheets by beating his teammate by a slim margin. However, the session was red flagged when Logan Sargent crashed into the barriers. Carlos Sainz, who was the winner in Australia 2 weeks ago, recorded the third fastest time of the session. FP2 was considerably affected by rainfall, and only a few drivers were brave enough to bring their challengers into the slippery Suzuka circuit. So, 9 drivers set some fast lap times, and out of those drivers, Oscar Piastri was the fastest. Behind him, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were the fastest of the session. None of the Red Bull drivers decided to put their challengers at risk. Once the track was completely dry, Max Verstappen ended the final practice session as the fastest driver ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. Most notably, Mercedes duo George Russell and Lewis Hamilton were able to record the third and fourth fastest laps of the session. Alonso was comfortably in 5th. All the teams got a good opportunity to adjust their challengers to the conditions in Suzuka, thanks to the dry climate that prevailed throughout the day. At the end of the first part of qualifying, Stroll, Gasly, Magnussen, Sargent and Zhou had reserved their places in the bottom part of the standings, being knocked out of the rest of the session. Ricciardo, Bottas, Tsunoda and Albon showed considerable improvements in their final attempt in Q1, pushing Lance Stroll, who had a relatively faster car, into 16th. Zhou also had the chance to escape out of the elimination zone with a better lap time like his experienced teammate Valtteri Bottas. Unfortunately, he ran over the curbs and lost control of his car, totally destroying his final flying lap in Q1. In Q2, the first to reserve a spot in the elimination zone was Alpine driver Esteban Ocon, who had the slowest car in the session. Tsunoda improved his position up to 10th in front of his home crowd, pushing his teammate out of Q3. But the Japanese driver was in risk of losing that position once again into the elimination zone if Bottas showed any improvement. However, Valtteri's lap time was only 13th fastest of the session, and the RB racing driver was lucky this time. So, at the end of Q2, Ricciardo, Hülkenberg, Bottas, Albon and Ocon were the drivers who failed to cross the hurdle. At the start of Q3, both the Mercedes drivers topped the timesheets for a brief moment before losing it to 2 Red Bull drivers. Then Ferrari and McLaren drivers started to improve their lap times, and Norris was able to rise up to 2nd spot, separating 2 Red Bull teammates at the top. But Perez once again improved, creating a Red Bull 1-2 in the timesheet. Meanwhile, Verstappen sealed his pole position comfortably, which was his 36th one in his entire F1 career. Tsunoda wanted to do something special in his home Grand Prix, but he had to be satisfied with 10th place in the final standings at the end of Q3. 2 Red Bulls were in front raw, and behind them, Norris, Sainz and Alonso reserved the spots in the opening grid. Piastri and Hamilton were in the 6th and 7th places respectively, and behind them, Leclerc, Russell and Tsunoda reserved the last 3 spots in the standings at the end of Q3. The Japanese Grand Prix started with 2 Red Bulls in front row, and as usual, Verstappen got a jump start, converting his pole position advantage to a race lead. But within a brief time interval since the start of the race, 2 cars went off to the wall, making a heavy crash. Daniel Ricciardo and Alexander Albon were the 2 drivers involved in that accident. Video footage clearly showed that Ricciardo's right rear wheel and Albon's front left wheel came into contact with each other, initiating this heavy crash. Race control immediately introduced a safety car session to the race, but finally, it ended up red flagging the session. So, the race was restarted on lap 3, with slight changes to the initial order. However, the 2 Red Bulls were comfortably at the start again. At the race start, Leclerc was able to beat his future teammate Lewis Hamilton into the 7th spot of the race. Meanwhile, on the 5th lap, Russell overtook the Japanese driver Yuki Tsunoda into the 9th spot, retaking the position that he had lost initially. At the same time, Valtteri Bottas attacked Esteban Ocon and moved to the 11th spot. On lap 13, Tsunoda appeared to be struggling a little bit after losing several track positions, but finally made a move against Gasly into the 14th spot. One lap later, the two Mercedes swapped their positions under the team orders, and Russell moved up to 5th, as he was the fastest out of the two Mercedes at that moment. The two Mercedes were on different strategies, and Hamilton was on a long one-stopper, so that may be the reason why team orders came into play. Verstappen decided to take a fresher set of rubber on lap 17, and Leclerc took the race lead in his absence. Meanwhile, Perez and Hamilton appeared to be battling for the 5th spot of the race, and Perez, who was driving on a fresher set of medium rubber, came out as the winner of that mini battle. Then in the subsequent lap, Sergio Perez attacked the other Mercedes of George Russell as well, claiming the 4th spot of the race. On the 19th lap, Hamilton lost one more track position to Carlos Sainz, who was the winner of the Australian Grand Prix. After losing the race lead to Leclerc on lap 17, Verstappen had to spend 4 laps behind the fast-moving Ferrari, but he attacked the Monegasque driver on lap 21 with the help of DRS, retaking the race lead. Sainz went wheel-to-wheel for a brief moment with George Russell on the same lap, and overtook the Mercedes driver, repeating a similar type of move that he did against Hamilton 2 laps prior. On lap 23, Sergio Perez made a clean pass against Lando Norris, creating the opportunity to finish the race as a podium finisher. Meanwhile, 5 drivers in the middle part of the pack, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Stroll, Bottas and Sargent entered the pit lane at once, turning the pit lane into a very busy place. On lap 26, Leclerc suddenly went off the road, and Sergio Perez converted that mistake into an opportunity to make his move against the Ferrari driver. Then he decided to make his final pit stop on lap 34 and rejoin Norris. After costing 2 track positions, he started his recovery drive with the help of fresh rubber pitted to his car. First, he overtook Norris on lap 35 and repeated the same move against Leclerc on the subsequent lap. Sainz, who was leading the race for a brief moment, decided to take fresh rubber 1 lap later, handing over the race lead back to Verstappen. This resulted to drop his track position down to 7th, but the front runners, who were running on fresher but relatively older tyres compared to Sainz, were easily beaten by the Spaniard, improving his track position up to 4th when there were 9 laps remaining. Meanwhile, on lap 33, a 3-way battle was started for the last point-offering spot between Hülkenberg, Tsunoda and Stroll. First, Stroll wanted to overtake Tsunoda, but before completing that move, Tsunoda started to accelerate his challenger towards Hülkenberg to improve his track position up to 10th. Tsunoda appeared as the winner out of these 3 drivers by occupying the 10th spot at the end of that mini battle in the midfield. On lap 42, Sargent went off the road at turn 9, creating the risk of causing a double DNF for Williams in this race, but he managed to slow down his car before meeting the barriers and rejoined the race after reversing his challenger quickly. After overtaking Norris into 4th spot in lap 44, Sainz didn't want to slow down his challenger, and he started attacking his teammate to improve his track position up to a podium finish. So Sainz easily overtook his teammate into the 3rd spot on lap 46, with the pace advantage that he had thanks to DRS. In the latter part of the race, Russell tried to overtake Piastri, who was running in 7th. Even though the move was not successful, it resulted in pushing Piastri off the road when there were 3 laps to go. After chasing down the McLaren driver for 3 more laps, George Russell successfully overtook Piastri on the final lap, improving his track position up to 7th. After a disastrous F1 campaign in Australia, Verstappen and his Red Bull team returned to its usual performance at Suzuka, scoring the 3rd Red Bull 1-2 finish of the season. Behind the 2 Red Bull cars, Carlos Sainz crossed the line, scoring 1 more podium. Leclerc and Norris occupied the remaining positions within the top 5. After battling hard throughout the race, Alonso occupied the 6th spot. With his clever move against Piastri, George Russell was able to occupy the 7th spot in the final standings. Piastri, Hamilton, and Tsunoda occupied the last point-offering positions in the final standings of the race. That's how the iconic Japanese Grand Prix concluded in great style, despite the changes to its time slot in the F1 calendar. How do you rate the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel to get more exciting Formula 1 news. We'll see you in the next video, guys. Goodbye.